the most important lessons that I can present. Being in the ministry a number of years, I've seen a lot of children that have really closed their spirit to their parents. And there's a reason for that. And so I wanted to present this lesson in a way to help us to realize that we don't want to get to that point where we poke our children so much, not with a finger, but poking them with unkind words or with anger, or whatever it might be, to the place where they will close their spirit up to us. Incidentally, what I'm going to talk about, a parent and child relationship, is the same thing is true with husband and wife. If a husband is going to poke his wife, make fun of her, whatever they do, eventually they will poke and poke and poke, and that spirit of that wife will be closed. Same thing is true with the wife who pokes her husband in such a way. And so I hope it's a lesson that will really be good. Proverbs chapter 18, verse number 14. Let's take a look at this. The human spirit can endure a sick body, but who can bear a crushed spirit? Who can bear a wounded, crushed spirit? Proverbs chapter 18, verse number 14. I want you to think about that. The human spirit can endure a sick body, but who can bear a crushed spirit? I also put Ephesians chapter 6, verse number 4 in your notes tonight, and I've given it to you in 4 different translations. And each one of them kind of presents it a little bit differently. And I just want to run through those, and just so you can let this unfold about not poking our children and how we deal with our children. And now a word to you parents. Don't keep on scolding and nagging your children, making them angry and resentful. Rather, bring them up with the loving discipline the Lord himself approves, with suggestions and godly advice. Now that's out of the Living Bible, but I kind of like what it says. Don't keep on scolding and nagging your children. Out of God's word is this next translation. Fathers, don't make your children bitter about life. Instead, bring them up in Christian discipline and instruction. It reads in the King James, and you fathers provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Then, of course, in the NIV, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So I want to focus tonight on your child's spirit. That spirit, that innermost being of a person. You know who you are. Each one of you have a name. You have your own genetics. You're a human being. I always like to say we're not human doings. Everybody wants to do. We need to become before we ever do. And so you have a spirit, that inner part. You know, and I've mentioned this many times. You may think you know me. You know what I look like. You know I've got gray hair, the color of my eyes, so on and so forth. But you really don't know me. And even my wife doesn't know me totally, because I have an inner person. And it's me. It's real. It's that spirit. It's that innermost part of my person. See, we often think that we have a body, and our body has a soul and a spirit. Well, the fact of the matter is, we have a spirit and a soul. It just happens to have a body that it's traveling around in. When we took this lady to the cemetery today, we placed her body in the ground. But we didn't place her soul and spirit in the ground, because she's still alive. She's in the presence of the Lord. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So sometimes as you look at that little child, that child has an inner person, inner spirit. That child has a body to that. Okay? But the most important thing about that child is not his body, it's its spirit and its soul. And so as you look at your children, think of that in those terms. We can stand a lot of physical pain. Some people can stand more than others. But when it comes to emotional pain, when it comes to that pain inside, it's a pain, and you probably have experienced it. Inside, maybe not necessarily inside the mind, but right inside here. You've had something that just really, really hurt. Again, it's not a physical pain, but it hurts. You wake up with it in the morning, possibly, go to bed at night with that. It's an emotional thing that travels from up here, whatever hurt we have, moves down into that emotional part of us. And that is very difficult for us to deal with. And I want you to think about your little children. They're human beings. They're not adults yet, but they have problems, issues, situations, just like we do. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because if you notice in the scripture, it really zeroes in on fathers, addressing them. Doesn't necessarily say parents, moms, and dads, but fathers. And I don't know why God directs it to us as fathers. Sometimes I think we get a little sloppy in our parenting, and maybe He's trying to point that out. Sometimes I think maybe we might have a little less patience with them. And so I don't know, but I think it can also mean the mothers as well. All right. But it uses the word fathers in this portion of Scripture. It's almost as if he's using the word father here as a verb and not a noun. In other words, it's one thing, in a biological way, it's easy to become a father. But to father children and to parent them as a father, as a verb in action, is something just a little bit different. Very easy to become a father. Very difficult to father and to parent those child. And so I think he's probably speaking in those terms. Now, let's go to our lesson and your notes there in the blanks. And I want to define exasperate. Don't poke your child. In this scripture, in the NIV, it says, do not exasperate your children. Exasperate means to make angry. To make angry. To make somebody very angry. To make somebody frustrated. Often by repeatedly doing something annoying and hurting. Just constant to that child. That's what exasperate means. Not to make them angry. As a matter of fact, it even has another definition, be to worsen. To make an unpleasant condition or feeling even worse. And so he says, fathers, moms, and dads, parents, don't do that. Don't exasperate your children. It's a caution, it's a warning. And it's designed to put us on guard concerning our anger. Now, I know we're human beings, and sometimes we lose our anger. Sometimes it's there. Okay, so you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. I'm not trying to set us up to that. But if we have anger issues, and it's really affecting our children, our marriage, we need to deal with those things. We don't have to live in that condition. I think it's interesting, the word provoke. Do not provoke your children. In the King James, it says, ye fathers, provoke not your children. And the word provoke comes from a Greek word, paragizo. The word para, like a paramedic, para means come alongside. Okay, like a parachute comes alongside. And so this word provoke comes from two words, para, alongside, and then the gizo means anger or enrage. So what he's saying is that you're angry, you're dealing with your child with anger, they come alongside, now they're angry, and you see how it works. It just continues to grow and grow till finally that child is just through with it. And so these are some warnings that he gives to us concerning poking our child. How many times have you ever been around somebody and you hear them talk to their children, say, you can't do anything right. You just can't do anything right. And you just keep telling the child, you just can't do anything right. And other things that we say to them. And eventually it has a great effect upon that child. And the same thing is true, and I just throw this out because husband and wife, we face that same type of dynamic, saying things to our wife. you can't, you just can't cook right, or you burn this, or whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. I remember my wife, when she first cooked some pork chops after we was married, maybe 6 months after marriage. My mom fried pork chops in a skillet, old iron skillet. And when they came out, they were nice and brown. You ever eaten pork chops like that? Just really brown. They were good. Well, my wife grew up in a different home. Her mother didn't put the pork chops in a skillet. She baked them. You ever seen a baked pork chop? It looks like death. I mean, it's just gray. You ever seen one? And I looked at that pork chop and I said, wow, man, that's not the way my mom cooked pork chops. I shouldn't have said that. But she's a smart woman. She said, you think your mom's pork chops are so much better than mine? Just go tell your mom to cook your pork chops from here on out, okay? But, if a person keeps doing that, eventually it'll cause a spirit that's going to be closing there. Colossians chapter 3, verse number 21. Fathers, don't scold your children so much that they become discouraged and they quit trying. Don't scold them so much that they become discouraged and quit trying. So we should stop anything that will eventually break the spirit of our child and cause their spirit to close to us. Now, I put a little diagram on your notes there. This is a sea urchin. You ever been out on the ocean, out on the beach, and you see one of these critters, and they got those tentacles, and they're laying there, they're open. If you take a stick and you start poking that sea urchin, you know what he's going to do? He's going to close up. And why is he going to do that? What's the purpose of closing up? To protect himself. He's going to protect himself. And when I first saw this a number of years ago, I saw this diagram. In fact, it comes from Gary Smalley. Those of you that might know him, he's written a lot of books on raising children. And I saw this and I thought, boy, have I seen this in marriage? Have I seen this in children and in parenting? So many times I thought, if I could just take this diagram and let people see it, and to realize that maybe when we poke our children and we just stay at it, that eventually that child's going to protect itself. It's going to close its spirit to that parent. And then you got some real problems. And so I'm teaching this lesson tonight, not that you've done this, but to give you some information so you don't go down that road. Because believe me, I've done a lot of counseling in 50 years. And I've seen a lot of closed spirits. Because people protect themselves. And so as you take those little children, I think about this teacher that I had. She was so gentle. And she was just so kind. She was stern, but she was a good teacher. And she dealt with us kids in a way that, we wouldn't close our spirit to it. And so as a parent, I just really encourage everybody to take this diagram. I hope you take it home and look at it. And then you ask yourself the question, wow, am I on this path? I don't want to be on this path. If I am, I need to tweak my parenting and to make some changes. Shirley didn't say much last week when she was up here, but we could have lost our kids. Just before they were in junior high, I was pretty hard on the kids, and she was too. And we saw that something was happening to them, and we needed to correct some things. Not them, it was with us. And part of it came because of our legalistic background in church. Because they were trying to be a little bit like what the world was, and it's back during the hippie period with long hair and all those types of things, and we're trying to teach our children, no, don't do what the world does, and kids get rebellious, and so, if you have to tweak your parenting, please do. I don't care how old that we are, how old the kids are. It just is so important. So I'm sure as you look at this picture, you have seen situations where this has taken place. I'm sure you have. Maybe family members, maybe people that you work with. Uh, you know, I've just seen a lot of close spirits in kids down through the years, especially when they get up into junior high, early high school. They just will close their spirit. Now, it isn't always the parenting, okay? Like sometimes kids get to that place where they want to fly and they're just going to go off the deep end. Had nothing to do with what the parents did. So every time your parents go out or your kids go off the deep end, don't always beat yourself up because they may just have chosen to do that. Okay, I've seen a lot of that in my life. So let's look at some ways in which we can exasperate a child. What are some things that causes this? Okay, A, overprotection. Overprotection, what I call helicopter parenting. You can anger your kids by fencing them in too much. And I've seen this many, many times. Kids are just smothered. And a controlling parent can really anger a child. Now, when I say a controlling parent, I'm not talking about somebody that wants to make the children mind and to behave. That needs to be done. But I've seen parents that go in, they got maybe a 13-year-old boy, and instead of letting that boy order their own food, the parent will say, well, he wants this, and he wants this, and he wants this, and he wants corn, wants this, and give him a Dr. Pepper, and blah, blah, blah. And so this kid grows up, and he never knows what he wants, because here's a parent, he wants this, and he wants this. Gets to be like junior in high school, going to the restroom. He wants this, he wants this, he wants it. I sit there and I look at the child, and I was like, look at the age of this child. He probably, but see what happened, it's a protective parent. And oftentimes, we want to control our kids so much so when they leave the house that we still control. We want them to be dependent upon us. Well, that's all right when they're little. But there comes a time when you want them to take their own steps and not to be dependent upon. I don't want my children in the age of 50 to be dependent upon me. I would hope that they grew up and I helped them as a parent. Go do your thing. If you need me, I'm there. I'm not going to tell you everything you need to do. If you want me to give you some advice, ask me. I'm not going to give it to you unless you want to, unless I saw them doing something that was, brutal to the kids or something like that. Overprotection is one of those things that can really, really cause a child to close the spirit. Now, on the other side of that is B, overindulgence. An overly permissive parent can stir up the anger of a child as much as an overprotective stifles the child. Children with too much freedom oftentimes feel a sense of insecurity. Did you know your kids really want boundaries? They do. It's a sense of security. They want to know that you love them so much that you're going to put some boundaries out there. And they look at that and say, well, hey, they're protecting me. It's a sense of security. Now, always keep in mind when you put the boundaries out there, they're going to test you. They're going to walk up to the line, maybe over the line a little bit. They're going to check you out, see if you really mean business. And so, overindulgence, a permissive parent that just lets the kids do everything. Kids need boundary. And so, both of those are dangerous. They really are. And so, we need to find that balance with our children. I've seen kids that can just do anything they want to do. Just do it. And when they're little, get up a certain age, even up into junior high, there are some boundaries that they need. And they want that. Again, they're going to test you, but those are some things that will exasperate a child. C, favoritism. Favoritism. You remember the story of Isaac and Esau? Esau and Jacob, I'm sorry. And see, Isaac preferred Esau, and Rebekah preferred Jacob. You go read that story. And the family experienced agony with those two brothers. They became bitter rivals because of favoritism. And, and we experienced that in our own family. We had one of our, the grandmother to our grandkids, we had 3 boys. They were the same to Shirley and me. One wasn't any better than the other. But we had a grandmother that thought one was just a little bit better. And she treated him a little bit better. And so I pulled her aside one day. And I said, listen, these are our 3 kids. We treat them the same. And we expect you to treat them the same. Don't show favoritism because the other kids were getting upset with it. And so it's one of those things that just pokes them. The other 2 kids see this grandmother doing things for this one, but not the other 2. And so favoritism is just and children know. They see it. It's just poking a little bit here. First thing you know, fine. If if you like that kid better, I'll close my spirit to you because you're not showing any attention to me. We had a couple of nieces that came and stayed with us. I think I shared with you a number of years ago, back in the 90s, from California. And one of them was in trouble with the law all the time. And so the mother spent all of her time with the one in trouble with the law, trying to protect that child, so on and so forth. But the other daughter, they were both about the same age, the other one, she neglected her. She spent all of her time over this daughter over here. And so this one over here became angry. Now, that was back in 1995. And the one that was in trouble with the law all the time, she went to KU and got a degree in law. And she works with troubled kids down in Austin, Texas today. But the other one never got married. And she's probably 40-something right now. Until last summer, she got married down in Austin, Texas. You know who she didn't invite to the wedding? Her mom and my wife's sister. So I don't know why she didn't invite me to the wedding. And the daughter told her mother, said, I decided to become independent and to live my life the way I wanted to live my life. That's kind of sad, isn't it? To see she'd been poked. And the mother might, she was trying to salvage this kid over here, so I give her the benefit of the doubt. But she should have set this child down once in a while and spent some time with it. So favoritism is just something that is can really poke at a child. Unrealistic goals. I pulled out my grade cards from 1947, 48, 49, 50, 51. I looked at some of them grades and I thought, man, I wasn't a very good student. And I was thinking, wonder what my mom thought every time she signed off on my grade card. And I think unrealistic goals. I'm glad my parents didn't have unrealistic goals for me. They wanted us to do the very best that we could, but if I was a B student, they didn't expect me to come home with A's. But if I was an A student, they did. But they never paid me anything for any of that. And so I thought about that as I told everybody at the funeral today, and as teachers, they just want to look at my grade card. I never look at my grade card. And I was just joking with them. But unrealistic goals. We can provoke our kids by constantly pushing for achievement. Now, I think that we ought to encourage them, whatever it might be that they're interested in, but to try to maintain a balance with them. In sports, sports are fun, but sometimes it gets so carried away. And I've seen kids that have just walked away from it and said, I've had enough of this. They got a couple times a week, and then you play, and blah, 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 do this. And I had a grandson that went through baseball, played over at West Urban just constantly. they'd go off to different cities on the weekend. They played baseball. And he went to Oklahoma Baptist University when he got out of high school. And he went down there and he played baseball the first year. And then he quit. And I said, well, how come you're not playing baseball? He said, I got tired of baseball. He said, I want to do my studies. He wanted to become a doctor, and so he studied and went to KU medical school. And he said, I had enough baseball. It wasn't there's only so much of that the kids can really do. And so just be careful, though. I'm not saying don't get them involved in those things, but back when our kids were growing up, we really didn't have Little League like we do now, but they did have Little League football up in McPherson where we were living at the time. And I went to one of the practices, and I watched the parents. I heard the parents yelling at the kids, and and Shirley and I, we talked about it, and I said, Shirley, I don't need my kids messing around with stuff like if they could just leave the parents home and let the kids play, they'd have a lot of fun. And I said, I don't need that bad mouthing. My kids don't need that. And so we chose at that time only to let them play in school sports where it's more controlled and they practice during the daytime and those type of things. But nowadays, Little League and just about everything is big. Let your kids be involved in them. But don't have unrealistic goals. They're not always going to score the soccer goal or the football or the basketball, whatever it might be. So unrealistic goals. Now, I think it's good to have goals. Matter of fact, one of the first lessons we had is to set some goals for your family and have for the future. But don't make them unrealistic. That's the thing. Neglect. Neglect. We can neglect our kids by not being home or by being home and not involved in their lives. And so keep in mind that you can be sitting in the same room and you're neglecting because you're not involved in their lives. They're probably on the phone playing a little video game or watching a football game or politics or something, and they're there. Okay, it's time to go to bed. All right, everybody goes their separate ways. And so they need some attention. And so want to make sure you don't neglect them. And then excessive discipline. Excessive discipline. Don't throw our weight around and constantly be punishing our kids. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't, and I use the word punishment. I'd really like to use the word discipline there because we had a lesson on that. But just constantly on their case about something. And eventually it will take a toll. I can give you two cases in the years of my pastoring where I saw two young men that were so poked. And it finally came to the place where both of them, when they were in their mid-30s, committed suicide. It was very sad. The kids had just closed their spirit up. Once it closed up to the parents, just closed up to society in general. And they were good kids. They had a side to them that was just so gentle. All of a sudden, boom, it's over. And so we don't want that to happen. And so these are some things that can exasperate a child. And we just need to watch that. So Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 says, get rid of all bitterness, passion, and anger. No more shouting or insults, no more hateful feelings of any sort. That's the good news. Ephesians chapter 4, verse number 31. Okay. But now I'd like to just kind of finish out this series about how do you open up a closed spirit. Oftentimes in marriages, we have one of the spouses that has a closed spirit. How do you open it up? It can be done. Keep in mind that sea urchin, the more that you poke it, the more it's going to close those tentacles, and finally it's going to protect itself and you're not going to hurt it. How can you open that closed spirit in a child and spouse, it can be done, but it's going to take some time. I don't know how many parents I've shown this to, and they walk away from it and never make an attempt to open up a spirit. I don't know why, but for some reason, there's nothing there for them. So let's look at just a few things. I'm the parent. I've got a child with a closed spirit. Again, I hope there's nobody here like that, all right? But the lesson is to help us so we don't get there. But there might be a time when we do have a child with a closed spirit. So the first thing we need to do is become tender-hearted. How to open a closed spirit? Become tender-hearted. And there's so much to that. And I mentioned this school teacher. She was so tender-hearted. And sometimes it's hard for men to become tender-hearted. But we need to. And some of the ways that that's expressed to a child is through body language. You know, if Shirley and I, we sit down with a couple that's going through marital problems, that we can detect it. I had a good pastor friend that he and his wife came by, it's been 25 years ago, our house, and they sat down on the couch and wanted to counsel with us. And when they sat down, the way they crossed their legs away from each other, you could tell there was a problem. Just body language told you, I don't like him, I don't like her, okay? And so body language, facial expressions, our tone of voice must become soft, must become gentle, caring. And sometimes it's hard for men to do that because, quote, men aren't supposed to be that way. I always get tickled with guys. Well, don't put your arm around me. I'm a man. I don't do this. Don't touch me. Then I watch a football game, the Super Bowl, and you'll see those football players. They'll be hugging each other, holding each other's hand, patting each other on the wrist. Well, why is it okay out there and not okay here? You know, you have to explain that one to me just a little bit. Well, it's because we don't want this over here because we're afraid somebody's going to laugh at us and, whatever it might be. But that facial expression, that tone of voice, the soft, gentle, and caring. And what we're saying to them is, I value you. I value you because of the way I'm dealing with you. And so it's so important. I think of all the cases that I've seen down through the years. If that mom and dad would have just changed their expression, their tone of voice, and let that child know, I value you. You are the most important possession that I have. You can give me diamond rings, $1 million, big house, nice car, great clothing, all fine stuff. That child is the most valuable thing that we possess. They belong to us. We brought them into this world. And so sometimes we have to change. We're the problem. Sometimes the child is the problem. And all your children are going to be different. Some of them are going to be strong-willed. You want to just knock the tar out of them sometimes, but you can't do it. They're strong-willed. And so you let them know that you value them. And also, I think you're saying to them, we know there's something wrong. We acknowledge that. We acknowledge the fact that there's something wrong. We want you to know that we do see that. And you can begin to open up. In marriage counseling, Pastor Bruce does a lot of marriage counseling. I've done some, but I've not as much as he has. But I have just sat in my office and I just said, if you could just acknowledge, you could straighten this out. Yes, there's something wrong, but you have to be tender-hearted with it. And, I've seen some crazy cases come into my office. And had a guy come in, his wife one time, he said, well, we're here because she wanted to come. Oh, okay. Yeah, she probably did, didn't she? And I looked at him and I said, it's probably wise that you came, because she wanted to come. So I took my attention off of her and I put it on him. And but see, he didn't acknowledge that there was a problem. No, I'm here because of her. She's the one that's got the problem. I don't have a problem. The fact of the matter is, he was the problem, but he wouldn't acknowledge it. See? And so it's important that we be tender-hearted. And also, I think it's saying to the child, and I think this is really important, maybe in the day in which we're living in, but probably when I was a child as well, is that we are open. We're saying to them, we are open to listening to you. What's going on? Okay. We will listen to you. Now, that's going to take us into some other steps as far as opening up that spirit. That's the first step. The second one is to increase understanding. To increase understanding. Increase the understanding of the pain that they are going through. You remember we talked about the pain? You remember the spirit, the soul, that inner person? That's where their pain is at. That's what has closed up to us, is that pain. We have to understand what that pain is all about. Why have they become argumentative? And why are they avoiding us? What is the pain? We have to start dealing with that. And the older your kids get up in the junior high and high school is really important, because that's when it's apt to really take place at that age. And I can remember dealing with our boys when they were at that age. And again, that was a period of time when we were starting to make some changes in our parenting. And I was very stern. And I was very controlling with them. And finally had to really make some, because I knew I was closing some spirits there, because I was poking them pretty good. Okay, C is to recognize the offense. The third step is to admit that we were wrong. If we were wrong, now there may be other issues other than what the parent is doing, but we need to recognize the offense if we were wrong. Might have been how we did something, might have been how we said something, might have been the attitude that we have, but to recognize the offense, and that is the hardest thing in the world. To see that I have done something wrong. I've done that in pastoring. There have been times I've had to go back to people and apologize to them because I did something wrong in pastoring. Maybe I treated them in a way I should not have. Maybe in the heat of the battle I said something I should not have said. And you have to admit that. If we can't admit that we're wrong sometimes, we're not perfect people. You agree with that? We're just not perfect. You're not perfect dad, not perfect mom. We're just not perfect. But if we're so proud, one of the things about politicians that really burns me is the fact nobody ever says anything I've done wrong. You know, you're not Jesus. He didn't do anything wrong. We do things that are wrong. We say things that are wrong. We have attitudes sometimes. And so we have to recognize that if that spirit is closing and it's something that we've done, said, or an attitude that we might have had. And then the next one is to attempt to touch. That might be difficult, but to touch will help you see if their spirit is beginning to open. In other words, if you touch and they back off, then you probably have not made much headway. But and if that's the case, if you've really gone through these other steps, then you might realize that that pain is deeper than what you might have thought. You don't know what goes through the minds of kids. You know, you're all sitting here right now, and your minds are going. I don't know what you're thinking about. You may be thinking about Wichita State's playing basketball right now. Wonder what the score is. You might be. Or you might be zeroed in on what we're doing here. It could be. Or you could be thinking about, man, I'm hungry. Can't wait till we get out of here. I can go get a bite to eat. Okay? I don't know what you're thinking about. There are a lot of things we could be thinking about. You might be thinking about a number of things. and something here catches your mind. So, well, I'm thinking on that, and then I'm thinking about something else. Some of you probably thinking about Super Bowl coming up. What kind of food we're going to have? We're going to have chips and sauce and all that. So I'm just saying that because you got kids in your home, you don't know what they're thinking. You have no idea. And so you don't know what they're thinking about you, how you're parenting them, what you're saying, how the attitude is. And so it's and so the pain might be deeper, and the offense might be deeper than what we might have thought. If that child, over a period of time, now it's not going to be like that, a child opened up the spirit, but eventually it can happen. That's why in marriage counseling it can happen as well, but it's not going to happen just overnight. It's a process that takes place. It takes two people working through, and so don't get in a hurry, and don't give up thinking, well, this isn't working, because it takes a while. And then the last thing is to seek forgiveness. Seek forgiveness. Ask the question, could you find it in your heart to forgive me? You know, if I've offended somebody, I go to them. And I say to them, will you forgive me? Okay? And I either expect an answer from them, either yes or no. And the reason I want an answer from them, it might not be an answer right that minute. But if they say, yes, I forgive you, then I don't ever want it brought up again because you forgave me. Okay? And so anytime that I've dealt with situations, I ask, will you forgive me? And they may say, no. Well, no, that's all right. I had a man in our church out in Valley Center spent 20 years, wouldn't forgive me. And finally one day he called me, and after I retired, and he said, I need to talk to you. And, you know, we'd had a kind of a battle, and I would say both of us probably were wrong in some areas. And I didn't want to have a relationship like that. I tried to reconcile, but I couldn't. But I learned one thing, forgiveness and reconciliation does not always go together. And so I knew I had to get it off my heart, so I forgave the man. And a couple of times I tried to shake his hand, and out in public he'd turn away, and I'm not going to shake your hand, and things like that. And, you know, it wasn't anything I could do. But 20 years went by. I retired, I got a phone call. He said, I need to talk to you. I said, okay. I said, what do you want to talk about? Well, I just need to talk to you. Meet you down at McDonald's, the 53rd and Reading. I'll be there. Cup of coffee. Walked in there, sit down. He said, I've got to get something off my chest. He said, I want you to know I forgive you. And I ask you to forgive me. He said, I've carried this for 20 years. He said, it eats me alive. I thought, why'd you wait 20 years? It's crazy, isn't it? Because we don't want to deal with it. You know, we offend somebody, we don't want to deal with it. We think that we just sweep it under the carpet, life's going to go on. My good friend Lee Drennan pastored First Bible Baptist Church up on North Oliver for many years. And he and I played golf every Monday. And we was going to write a book. We was going to call it Golf Course Discourse. But we didn't. But I think it would have sold. But we used to talk about Christianity, and I think we both came to the conclusion that the one thing that holds Christians back the most from growing in their Christian life is unforgiveness. We just will not forgive people. And Jesus said we're to forgive people like he forgave us. He said, what I did for you, I want you to do for other people. And it just stymies our growth. And so, and incidentally, the word in the Greek for forgive means to release or to set free. To release, to set free. It'll set you free. And so many people that, go through a divorce. And I had a daughter-in-law that kind of went through this, and she just couldn't release that individual. And I used to say to her, I said, he's still controlling you. Because everything goes good for him, and it just makes you mad. Something bad happens to him, boy, you get excited. And I said, he's just pushes your button all the time. I say, you let him control you. He's controlling you. I'm telling you. Until you release him, forgive him, move on, it's going to stymie you. And she finally did. She was finally able to do that. I was so glad to see her to be free. Now, I understand there's a lot of pain that goes through divorce and things like that. So that's not something that just happens overnight. But anyhow, this is poking the child, closed spirit, and how to open that spirit up. And I wanted to teach this lesson because, many of you have little children, and you don't want to get to that point. And so every time that you kind of fly off the handle, maybe jabbing that child just a little bit, just remember this sea urchin, okay? Just remember that. Well, I can't do this. I got to back off. Maybe you know somebody. Maybe you already have a child. The spirit's already close to you. Work at it. Get it opened up. And it can be done, okay? Anybody have any questions? I'll probably let you out early tonight. But I just hope that we've shared some things with you. My teaching on raising children, I think that you've got to start over here and get these things in line. How God is our Father. And then you can start talking about, well, how do I discipline my child, how to do this, how to do that. And the fact of the matter is, the two of you will come to grips with that, and you'll sit down and you'll talk about it. And I just encourage you as parents to sit down and learn as much as you can about parenting. I guess we get to the place where we think, I've got it all figured out, but we don't. And but learn as much as you can about parenting. Sit down and talk, husband and wife, father and mother, and you got to be on the same page. Talk about discipline. What do you plan on doing? And then when you make up your decision, the two of you stick with it. Okay? Because if you don't do that, that child learns pretty fast how to drive a wedge between the two of you. All right? And so you have to do it. Get on the same page. This is what we're going to do if this child does this. And then don't let that child talk one of the parents into changing that. Because those kids, they learn the system pretty fast. Believe me, it doesn't take them long. And so sit down and talk about it. Talk about your children. And what do you want? How do you discipline all the areas of raising children? How do you want to do it? And it's just so important. It's hard. It's hard to sit down eyeball to eyeball, mom and dad, and start asking each other questions. What do you think we ought to do? What do you think we ought to do? And then stick with it. It's just so important. The worst thing you can do is have an agreement, and then something happens. You as a parent, you want to do this. The other parent, oh, no, we can't do that. And that's just not right. You have to stick with it. And so it's very important. Anybody have any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share tonight, or you haven't been talking much? Nobody ever taught me. Most of the books I read about parenting is about, if you're going to spank a child, use a belt or use this or use that. And, I figure I'll leave that up to, just don't beat your kids. But, where do you spank them on the bottom end? Well, you don't, you got to be careful with abuse and those type of things, physical. But I think what I've been trying to teach in this series is to see the value of that child, how you as a parent, how you can parent that child like God parents you. See? And I think God's a pretty good parent, don't you? He's never done anything to me that's ever hurt me. And so I want that pattern for my parenting. How does God parent me? And so I have to do some studies on that. And then, of course, discovering your children, I think, is just really, really important. I tell you what, the greatest job in the world is raising up children. It is. It's just great.